My name is Brooke Allen. I'm 34 years old, a freelance graphic designer based in Austin, Texas. And last week, while I was lying in a hospital bed with a broken leg, 3 fractured ribs, and a concussion from a car accident, I found out that the man I had loved for 4 years was out partying with his ex-girlfriend. I didn't find out through some dramatic confession. No, I found out because he posted pictures. Pictures of him laughing with his arm around her at some rooftop party. The caption? Finally free from the needy drama queen and her constant demands. Let that sink in. I was recovering from surgery with metal pins in my leg, barely able to sit up on my own, and he was out celebrating his newfound freedom. And apparently that freedom looked a lot like cheap beer, loud music, and the same girl he used to claim was toxic. What hurt the most wasn't just the betrayal. It was the quiet realization that this wasn't new. It wasn't sudden. It was the final straw in a long line of disappointments I had ignored for years. And maybe it took a collision literally and emotionally for me to finally see things clearly. That night in the hospital, I didn't scream or cry. I didn't send him angry texts. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, while the soft hum of machines filled the silence. My best friend Grace sat beside me, reading the messages pouring into my phone. Some from him, some from his friends, and one, hilariously, from his mother. I didn't respond to any of them, because while he was posting party photos, I was making a plan. A plan that would end with every piece of his gaming setup, his beer collection, and his man cave junk, exactly where it belonged in the dumpster behind our apartment. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you how we even got here in the first place. We met at a community volunteer project. I had just wrapped up a stressful client campaign and thought it'd be good for my soul to spend a Saturday planting native trees at a public park in East Austin. He was already there, wearing a dirt-smudged t-shirt with a cheesy graphic that read "Compost Happens." His name was Ethan, 36. Tall, easygoing, and with the kind of scruffy charm that made people laugh, even when his jokes weren't that funny. He introduced himself as the Compost King, and I thought it was ridiculous but endearing. He talked about decomposition like it was some kind of sacred ritual. Breaking down, he told me, is the first step to building something better. My plant-loving heart thought, okay, maybe this guy gets it. We ended up paired together for most of the day, digging holes, hauling mulch, swapping stories. I learned he was between jobs, having left a startup that didn't align with his values. He said he was figuring things out, searching for a more intentional life, a softer way to exist in a hard world. It sounded poetic at the time. In hindsight, it was a giant red flag dressed up in patchouli. Still, I was charmed. He brought me coffee the next weekend, remembered my dog's name, texted me goodnight with little leaf emojis. It felt easy, like something that grew naturally, without trying too hard. And for a while it was. When he finally moved in a year later, it was supposed to be temporary just until he got back on his feet. But temporary turned into permanent. And getting back on his feet turned into a never-ending cycle of side gigs, excuses, and broken promises. But I told myself love meant patience, that he just needed time. That if I supported him now, he'd bloom into the man he was meant to be. I ignored the unpaid rent, the empty fridge, the fact that I was the only one doing the laundry. Because I loved him. Because he told me I grounded him. Because I believed in the version of him that showed up on that first day with dirt under his nails and metaphors about soil. Turns out, the only thing being composted in that relationship was my self-worth. Over the 4 years we were together, Ethan contributed to rent exactly 7 times. I remember the number because I kept track more out of quiet desperation than spite. The lease was in my name, because as he put it, his credit was temporarily under review. That review, by the way, seemed to last forever. He was between jobs about 60% of the time. During those phases he would stay up all night gaming, sleep through the morning, and emerge sometime in the afternoon asking if I had any plans for dinner. When he did land work temporary gigs, part-time contracts, it always ended within a few weeks, followed by long explanations about how the management was toxic or the environment wasn't aligned with his emotional needs. Meanwhile, I was taking on extra freelance projects to cover both halves of the rent. I skipped vacations, canceled subscriptions, and quietly stopped going out with friends. Every month felt like a race against bills while he reassured me, we're a team, babe. We'll get through this. Except I was the only one rowing the boat. And still, I stayed. I stayed because I wanted to believe the struggle would pass. That he'd find his footing. That my support mattered. It's a dangerous thing, the way we romanticize potential, especially in people who do nothing to reach it. The money wasn't even the worst part. It was the constant emotional drain. The small ways he chipped at my confidence, cloaked in playful sarcasm. If I asked him to help clean, he'd joke, "That's your superpower, babe, domestic goddess." If I brought up finances, he'd say, "Why do you stress so much? You're always so uptight." He borrowed my car more times than he asked about my day, used my laptop, ordered from my Uber Eats account, streamed from my Netflix profile, always with the casual entitlement of someone who thought love meant access. I found myself doing mental gymnastics to justify it. He's just going through a rough patch. He's figuring things out. At least he's not cheating. Funny, the bar was so low it was practically buried. I covered for him with friends, lied to my parents, laughed off the red flags like they were cute quirks. And when he forgot anniversaries or missed dinners, I told myself he was overwhelmed. But deep down I was overwhelmed, overworked, overcompensating. And slowly, quietly, I started losing pieces of myself. My hobbies faded. My joy thinned out. My world shrank around the needs of a man who barely noticed. That's the thing about carrying someone else for too long. You forget what it feels like to stand up straight. And I didn't even realize how much weight I was holding until everything came crashing down. The accident happened on a Thursday afternoon. I was driving home from a client meeting when a delivery van ran a red light and slammed into the passenger side of my car. The impact spun me into a light pole. I don't remember much except the sound of glass shattering and the screech of metal. When I woke up in the hospital, I had a broken leg, 3 fractured ribs, a mild concussion, and a long list of bruises. The doctor told me I was lucky. It didn't feel like luck. I couldn't walk. I couldn't sit up without help. I couldn't even breathe deeply without sharp pain in my ribs. My life had come to a full stop in the blink of an eye. Ethan came to see me once. 20 minutes. He stood awkwardly at the foot of the bed, scrolling on his phone half the time. Said hospitals gave him anxiety. Said he needed to process the trauma in his own way. I didn't argue. I was too drugged, too tired. But in my head, something cracked. Because the person who stayed, who fed me, helped me to the bathroom, held a cold rag to my forehead when the migraines came, was Grace, my best friend. She slept in a stiff hospital chair for 3 nights straight. Brought me clean clothes. Washed my hair in that tiny sink with shampoo she brought from my apartment. She didn't owe me anything, but she showed up anyway. That's what love looks like. On the 3rd night, I was trying to eat hospital pudding when Grace suddenly went quiet. She was scrolling through her phone, her face pale. I asked what was wrong. She hesitated. Then, gently, she handed me the screen. There he was, Ethan, smiling at a rooftop party, his arm wrapped around his ex-girlfriend Tiffany. The caption read, "Finally free from the needy drama queen and her constant demands." I stared at it, blinking, numb. 4 years. 4 years of groceries, rent, rides, patience. 4 years of holding everything together. And while I lay broken in a hospital bed, he was posting about how happy he was to be rid of me. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even text him. I just laid there, cold clarity settling over me like a second skin. That was the moment I knew I was done carrying him. It was time he learned how to stand on his own. I didn't confront him. I didn't comment. I didn't even mention the post. Instead, I turned inward and started planning. The thing Ethan had apparently forgotten was that the apartment we shared was under my name only. He wasn't on the lease. He had never contributed to a deposit. Not once had he made a consistent rent payment. And for the past 3 months, he hadn't paid a single dollar toward the bills. I knew that if I waited, if I let emotions lead, I might soften. I might start rationalizing his behavior again, telling myself he didn't mean it, that he was just drunk, stressed, scared. But I didn't want an apology. I wanted my life back. So I called my landlord. Explained the situation. He was more than understanding. I called my younger brother, Dylan, who had helped me move in 4 years ago, and had always been skeptical of Ethan. Then I called my cousin Mia, who worked in property law, just to be sure I wasn't overstepping anything. They all had the same reaction, about time. We coordinated a plan. Ethan had been back and forth to the apartment while I recovered at Grace's place. He had no idea what was coming. That worked in my favor. The plan was simple. On Saturday, Dylan and 2 of his friends, both strong guys who'd moved furniture for a living, would come over and pack up every single thing that belonged to Ethan. Every crusty sock, every collector's edition game, every Funko Pop still sealed in its box. I gave them a checklist. I didn't want to destroy anything or get petty. I just wanted it gone. Out of my space. Out of my life. Anything valuable, his social security card, medical records, and a few childhood photos, I placed in a separate box and left it with the landlord for safekeeping. As for everything else, it was headed to the dumpster behind our building, not the recycling bin. The actual dumpster. Because if Ethan insisted on treating the woman who housed, fed, and supported him like trash, then maybe he'd be more comfortable among it. I was calm, focused, detached. Not out of cruelty, but because I was finally stepping out of the fog. The years of excuses, of bending myself in half to support a grown man with a teenager's mindset, they were done. I wasn't angry. I was done. And that was so much more powerful. Saturday morning came, and with it, a strange calm. Dylan and his friends arrived right on time, each carrying a box and a look of silent determination. I sat on the couch, leg elevated in its cast, sipping coffee and directing traffic like a general at war. We started with what Ethan valued most: his gaming setup. 3 curved monitors, a custom-built PC he swore was top tier, and a throne-like gaming chair he once refused to let me sit in, because it molds to my posture. Dylan lifted that chair like it was a cursed artifact and marched it straight to the dumpster. Then came the collectibles, his limited edition figurines still in their boxes because, according to Ethan, unboxing ruined their value. His craft beer collection, aging untouched in our pantry, some bottles dating back to year 1 of our relationship, his signed baseball cards which I wasn't even allowed to dust, all of it packed and tossed. We didn't break anything. We didn't slash his clothes or smash his electronics. That wasn't the point. We were simply removing him cleanly, efficiently, completely. It took 4 hours. 4 hours of discovering bags of chips stashed under the bed, receipts for impulse purchases I never knew about, and socks that could have qualified as biological weapons. Every drawer we opened was a reminder of how much I had tolerated. When we finished, the apartment felt quiet, lighter, like it could finally breathe again. I left one box clearly labeled with his essentials. It sat by the landlord's office ready for pickup. I even added a note. "This is all that matters. The rest was just noise." The landlord, bless him, offered to change the locks immediately. I didn't hesitate. Within an hour, Ethan was officially locked out of a life he had coasted through for years. Later that evening, he must have returned. I wasn't there to see it, but the landlord texted me. He showed up, demanded to be let in. I told him to call the police if he thought it was unfair. He left. That was Ethan in a nutshell: loud threats, empty action. For the first time in 4 years, my home was mine again. And when I looked around the now half-empty apartment, I didn't see what was missing. I saw what was finally gone. The irony of it all? I was the one who got Ethan the job interview he'd been bragging about. Before the accident, I had recommended him for a position at a financial services firm, where my old college roommate's brother was the hiring manager. Ethan had been unemployed for months, and I wanted to help. I believed that maybe, just maybe, this job would be the turning point. He was supposed to start the following Monday. But after I saw that post, the one where he called me a needy drama queen, I realized something. I had been his reference, his advocate, his bridge. And now, I was going to be the reason that bridge burned. I reached out to the hiring manager, professionally and respectfully. I explained that I had referred Ethan under different assumptions. I attached screenshots of his social media posts, including the one mocking me while I was hospitalized. I also included a brief summary of his rental and financial behavior, namely, that he hadn't paid rent in months, had a history of unreliability, and once overdrafted his account buying video games. I didn't exaggerate. I didn't lie. I just told the truth. Would you want someone handling your retirement account who can't even manage his electric bill? They didn't respond right away, but the next morning, I got an email. "Thank you for the information. We've decided to move in a different direction with the position." Translation: no job. Later that afternoon, my phone buzzed with a flood of messages from Ethan. First, angry. "Where's my stuff? What did you do? You can't do this to Amy." Then, desperate. "Please. I'm sorry. I was drunk. Katie doesn't mean anything. I was just stressed. Let's talk." And finally, pathetic. "I need you. You're the only one who ever believed in me. I love you." But I didn't respond. Because believing in someone isn't the same as saving them. And I was done trying to save a man who was determined to sink. If Ethan was a storm, his mother Deborah was the aftershock. After the job offer disappeared and the dumpster discovery made its way back to him, Deborah started calling. A lot. By the time I checked my voicemail, there were 43 missed calls in under 2 days. I finally answered call number 44, because honestly, I wanted to see how deep the rabbit hole of denial could go. She opened the call sobbing. "He hasn't stopped crying in 2 days. He's devastated," she wailed. I stayed silent. Then came the guilt. "You ruined his life. He was going to propose, you know. He showed me the ring." "A ring? The man who couldn't remember to pay for toilet paper had a ring?" She accused me of destroying his property, of being cruel and vindictive. Said Ethan told her I had controlled his finances and isolated him from his family and friends. That one made me laugh out loud so hard I nearly popped a stitch in my side. "Deborah," I said, calmly, "when was the last time Ethan paid rent?" There was silence. "He told me you had a system," she said finally, "that he covered other expenses." "What expenses?" "I paid for groceries, utilities, rent, streaming services, internet." She interrupted, flustered. "I'm not privy to your arrangement." "Good," I replied, "because I'm happy to clarify." And I did. I told her about the $177,000 in credit card debt I had accrued over the years trying to keep us afloat. About how I sold my grandmother's jewelry to cover bills Ethan promised he'd handle. About how I drove him to family functions when his car got repossessed, and still managed to buy her Christmas presents each year. I told her about the post, the one she claimed not to have seen. I offered to send her documentation, bank statements, Venmo logs, text messages, receipts, literal and emotional. She didn't take me up on the offer. She just said she needed to talk to Ethan and hung up. She hasn't called since. Funny how quickly loyalty fades when reality steps into the room. And for the first time, I didn't feel like the crazy one trying to justify why I stayed. I felt like a woman who finally stopped apologizing for being right. I thought that after the job was gone, the apartment cleared, and the mother silenced, Ethan would finally disappear from my life. But if there's one thing Ethan always loved, it was a performance. A few days after the fallout, I got an unexpected message from Remy, his old college roommate. We'd only met once or twice in passing, but he reached out with a simple warning. "Ethan's planning something. He says he's going to win you back. Some big gesture." I stared at the message, then laughed. Not out of fear, not out of anxiety, just disbelief at how predictable Ethan still was. Remy went on to say that Ethan had been crashing on his couch, alternating between crying and ranting. He was apparently rehearsing speeches in the mirror, talking about how he'd prove his love and show the world he's changed. I thanked Remy for the heads up and asked him to let me know if Ethan started talking about anything concerning. He promised he would and apologized for not seeing through Ethan sooner. Turns out, Ethan owed Remy money too. None of it surprised me. What did surprise me was how calm I felt. For the first time in years, I wasn't bracing for impact. I wasn't walking on eggshells or second-guessing myself. If Ethan showed up with flowers, or a boombox under my window, or some monologue lifted from a bad romantic comedy, it wouldn't change a thing. Because I knew now what love wasn't. Love isn't erasing yourself to make someone else comfortable. It isn't covering for a grown man who refuses to grow up, and it sure as hell isn't forgiveness on demand. Ethan could throw whatever performance he wanted. But this time, the stage was empty, and I wasn't in the audience anymore. I stayed with Grace for a few weeks during my recovery. Her guest room became my sanctuary, quiet, warm, and free of gaming noises or passive-aggressive sighs. Every morning I opened my laptop with a cup of tea and browsed apartment listings. Not because I was in a rush to move out, but because for the first time in years I had options. I could choose where I lived, how I lived, and most importantly, who I allowed into that space. My lease was ending in 30 days, and I wasn't renewing it. That apartment had too many ghosts. Too many nights of cooking for someone who never said thank you. Too many mornings where I tiptoed around someone who claimed to be finding himself while I lost myself completely. One night, while Grace and I were watching reruns and eating ice cream from the carton, I said aloud, almost without thinking, "I feel lighter." And I did. It wasn't just the absence of Ethan's things. It was the absence of the weight I didn't even know I was carrying. The invisible burden of constantly managing another adult's emotions, responsibilities, and ego. I had stopped explaining, stopped justifying, stopped hoping someone would finally see my worth. Because I saw it. I saw how strong I was to survive the accident, the betrayal, and the years of slow erosion. I saw how capable I was of rebuilding alone, with my own 2 hands. And that realization. It was worth more than any apology Ethan could offer, more than any fake proposal or grand gesture. The truth was simple, I hadn't lost anything. I had finally let go of someone who was never really holding on. And in that space, something new could begin. Sometimes we stay in relationships not out of love but out of habit, fear, or the hope that things will magically get better. But healing starts when you stop waiting for someone else to change and start choosing yourself. If you've ever felt unseen, unheard, or taken for granted, let this be your reminder. You are allowed to walk away. You are allowed to protect your peace. You are allowed to start over. Thank you for listening to my story. If it resonated with you, please like, share, or comment below. You never know who might need the courage to take their first step too.